I think I will get started. So thank you for coming. Welcome to my talk. I'm going to talk about surveying the C++ community. And I'm Jens Weller. I run Meeting C++. Conference will be announced this week for this year. And since 2012, I'm active as a community manager for Meeting C++ and C++ itself. I work as a C++ evangelist, supporting the C++ community, social media, and building a global network for C++ is what I mainly do. You can reach me on Twitter at Meetingcpp and Meeting Embedded. Since there's already a lot of questions in this talk, as it's a question about talk about surveys, kind of if it's like not really an important question, I like to handle it after the talk, either in the Discord or in the time after the talk here on Zoom. So I'm really not sure like how the timing of this will be. So thank you for coming. The tool I'm talking about, most of the data comes from survey.meetingcpp.com. And also I started last year an online activity, an online user group. You find all those activities under online.meetingcpp.com. And with that out of the way, let me start my talk with a quick question. Did you notice a lack of statistics and facts from the real world in talks at C++ conferences? Because after a while, I did that. Not every talk needs that, but that definitely for some talks or just from some questions that you ask yourself about the C++ community, that we have a certain lack of data in what the adoption for a standard looks like, or what usage of things look. And so that also kind of brought me to the question, like, what do we really know about the C++ community out there, right? A few of you come to our conferences, but a lot of other folks don't, and some are on Twitter, some are somewhere else. And what do we really know about this group? And a bit about that is the talk today. And also, I think that part of this data is already known. It's known to companies. It's like known in part of tooling and IDEs, code tools, and user data and usage data and internal customer surveys, commercial surveys like sales and QA surveys, or white papers. Like the Qt company loves to do that. They write a white paper and you can download it if you give them their contact. And I used to do like audience surveys at Meeting C++, which are fun, but they're not preserved. They're just like for a moment. And then there's other things like the Tuba index, which last year showed that C++ is the fastest growing language. And I leave it to you what you want to think about that. Personally, in my opinion, it was kind of a nice headline, but yeah, let's look at some other facts. I just want to quickly give you an overview on just some things you can do with the data from the tool. You can use it for teaching, for showing statistics, for usage data, talks and trainings, and communication, especially if you need visual aid for your talks or your presentations in your company, and like presentations for your manager or debates for your manager. That's always very easily there and available for you to just download some of the data and show the graphs, and use it as a visual aid in debates with management, etc. But let me just start with an overview on the surveys. There are 2 annual surveys. ISOCPP just recently did their 2021 survey, and 2 weeks ago, I think, the results were publicized. And also JetBrains does a yearly survey. They already did run their survey for 2021, but as of now, I could not find the results. They're probably published later. So I put the recent results for ISOCPP in here. And JetBrains is actually the company which started first doing the surveys. A bit about that later. And yeah, Meeting C++ used to do a lot of surveys on Twitter. And on Twitter, you can ask a question, and it's then single choice, and you have 4 options. And yeah, it runs like for 24 hours or a week, and it's okay. It gives you some nice things. This is like actually a survey which I did run for my last CppCon talk in 2019. And then I was like, well, actually I can combine that, and just it was like, how I got some useful graphs for the start of my talk. But it's like really limited in the usability and kind of what you want to ask. There's no multiple choice. You're limited to 4 options, and I thought there has to be something better. And so for some years, I was planning to do a survey tool, and in 2020, I was finally ready to launch it. And it is a continuous survey. The questions are single and multiple choice right now. And on the right, you see one example question. And then on the bottom, you see the example graph. And we will see many of those graphs in this talk, because this talk is about the results. I added a new feature in Spring. You can now actually look at the results for 2020, which I aggregated. And you also can compare the results to either the overall survey, or you can compare the results to the ongoing survey for 2021. And that's what I currently do here in this graph. On the left, you see the 2020 results, and on the right, you see the 2021 results. And one of the big differences is that I think at the end of 2020, there was BoostJSON released, and I added it to this question, and we see that in 2021, a lot more people have then picked up that they also use BoostJSON. And a few technical details. The tool is session-based. Either you're logged in, or when you just vote without being logged in. I don't know if the track host can hear me. And I saw a raised question, but I'm not like, I'm full screen and I don't want to touch the setup here. So questions, please, after the talk. So technical details, I save the votes as an aggregate, but also as the vote itself. That makes it like possible that I'm able to combine questions and to look into what people said, which from different features. We're going to see that later. And the latest feature I'm planning is like to give you options for the graph display. There was recently like feedback, hey, it would be cool if you could sort the results of the graphs. That makes sense for some graphs, but for other graphs, like the H graph, doesn't really make sense to sort it. So I want to give you options there, and that there is a default which is reasonable. But if you want to sort it, or if I want to sort it for a blog post, or someone else wants to sort it for their graph, they can do it. Other technical details, answers are locked for 30 days. If you skip a question, it's locked for 60 days. And re-answering the question does not add to the aggregate. And yeah, so the tool right now contains over 70 questions and answers, and it's kind of hard to find the right combination between question and answer. And there's a lot of questions which I kind of was not sure if I want to ask them. I think some questions I turned off again. And yeah, it's not always easy to find the fitting. There's some questions which I think, yeah, could be nice, but I cannot find the right answers, and I can post it. And let's look into C++ standard adoption, because it's like, I think, one of the most interesting things which we didn't know in the last decade for a long time. How actually are the new standards adopted, and how are they used? And JetBrains actually is like the first survey which was actually giving public data on that in a good survey set and a good data set. So you see that in 2017, we see that which C++ standards do you regularly use? It's 66% for C++ 11. And if we look on the next year, we can see that C++11 drops slightly under 60%, and the new standards catch up a bit. But as you can see from the disclaimer, this is a multiple choice question, so it's not like only one question. And also, yes, JetBrains has every year different type of graph. So in the next year, we see again C++11 gets up to 61%, and in the next year, we see that C++98 and 03 is now combined to 13%, and C++11 is only at 46%, while C++17 is now the second place with 41%. And I'm not sure if, I think both are multiple choice. That's like one of the things which I'm not sure about here. ISOCPP started their survey in 2018. They do ask a similar question, but not the same question, and they also give a different set of answers. They give you the option to answer yes, partial, or no to the question, what versions of C++ are you allowed to use in your current project, work, or school? And as this is, again, multiple choice, we see that the older standards, of course, have more reach into the C++ community. That's just kind of logical. And in the next year, it's very similar. C++17 gets a bit more adoption, and then in 2020 and the last year, we see that still lots of folks can't use C++20, which is also logical because compilers just are available now. And so people just start picking this up and playing around with it. And in 2021, we see like this is a slight change. We probably would have to compare like the 2018 and 2021 graphs to actually see a real change. But then the first graph didn't contain C++20, etc. In my own survey, I do ask 3 different questions, which are, in this case, the first question, which C++ standards do you currently use in your projects? That's multiple choice. And when I did this talk for the first time, I did a screenshot for this, and now we see the screenshot, which is now the current one, just from yesterday. And we see that it's kind of not much of a change. C++17 is very popular. C++20 has gained a little bit, and C++11 and C++14 are almost equal. If I go into the 2020 example of this question, which standards do you have experience in, which is multiple choice, then we see that we get a similar result to what JetBrains and ISOCPP is asking. So C++11 is the most popular one, and C++14 drops a bit, and then we get to C++17. And it's a very similar result, just that the newer standards catch up to C++11 a bit in the current graph, and C++20 gains a little bit, which is also to be expected. Then I also ask a single choice question. Which standards do you use the most at work currently? And here we see that C++17 is just the one which gets the most usage. And if we look into the data from this year, we see that C++11 has become a bit more popular. And there is not a big change to last year, except that C++20 picks up a little bit, and C++17 stays in the lead. But so when I had the message that this talk got accepted, I thought about what to do with a tool for this talk, and I decided that I have a question about Boost, and that's what we're gonna go have some fun with now. We're gonna combine questions with the Boost usage. So let's look at that graph first. Here we see the result for do you use Boost, and I'm going to combine other questions now with the data from Never, Sometimes, and Daily. to just to have a compromise between screen space and you still be able to read or see some graphs. I also want to make a quick disclaimer. In the coming slides, the question will be used to show the answers from folks answering. So this is only correlated. And of course, the session has to be first answering the boost questions in these three categories and answering the other question, which we're taking a look at. This is based on the combined feature, which you can easily reach on the survey tool. And so let's start just with the last question, which we saw with the current standards. Let's see how this looks with Boost. So the folks which don't have any experience, which never used Boost, are a bit more in the section of C++11, as we see here. And as Boost usage increases to sometimes we see more like a graph like it was back in the current result, but it was a very, very slightly better lead for C++17, I would say. And in the folks which say that they use Boost daily, we see a clear trend to C++17 and the newer standards and C++11 not being as popular. And a slight rise in the use of C++20, but of course, if you use Boost, using the newer standards sometimes is also a bit difficult. So that's not like that they directly jump on that either. Then when I kind of, was thinking about questions, what to ask with the tool, I figured out I'm able to ask, what containers do folks use? Because it's like interesting to know that, and not very surprising that vector wins. And this is like one of the questions where it's kind of interesting to look at the minor details. If we go into the Boost usage, there's just unordered multi-map is used slightly more, seems in the daily Boost usage, but that might be just a few users. So it's like really, really difficult to see a difference in this graph. And I think it's like statistically not really relevant. Except that maybe multi-map and multi-set seem to be a bit more popular with those users, and that's maybe a hint that this is a more advanced feature and never contains probably also a lot of folks which are just starting with C++ and don't have a lot of experience. So this says more about the usage of C++ in those groups and the Boost usage. If we look at the build systems, this is CMake is very popular. And also this is a great graph to show you that I often prefer to have like an option in there than not having an option in there. So some people say like Ninja is not a build system, and in the prior graph you could probably spot that span is in there, and span is not a container. But I rather have it in there to have the data than to have people ask me why it's not in there, because not everyone like knows that Ninja is not a build system or that span is not a container. And if we look at the data here, we can just see that Boost build is actually used with the Boost folks, which is not very surprising, but it's like just a little bit of a validation of the data. And otherwise, this graph is very similar. Seems like Ninja is also being used way more than with the Never. But again, like the difference between daily and Never, I think, is also a difference in experience often in C++. Then, as the JSON library question contains a question about the Boost library, I thought I'd bring it in there. And this is the overall result of the survey, which we didn't see so far. So we see that the Boost JSON has picked up a little bit, but it's not like one of the leading libraries in this field yet. That will be interesting to see. And here, those folks not using Boost don't use it. And then we see that the usage picks up, but also we see that it seems like those daily users, JSON is a bit more popular than those sometime users. And here I'm also want to bring the folks which often use Boost, because they were the folks which in just in the survey seem to have the most usage of JSON. And here you can see that they use a lot of, there we see a bit of an adoption of Boost JSON. But this still needs a long time to actually see a trend in there. So I think in half a year or a year, you will see a bit more in this. So coming from the container question, I thought maybe it would be interesting to know more about the standard features. And so I figured out I can ask questions about language and library features, which I do for C++17. So that's the C++ library features, which contain a lot of Boost libraries. File system, any, optional, string view, variant, that's all in Boost, right? So are we going to see a difference in the Boost usage? And interestingly, either the daily folks still answer it because they think it's the same, or they also have started to use those features in the standard, which I can understand that that is a thing to do. But this is again one of the questions where we don't really see a big difference. So let's move on to the language features, where we can see that if constant expression, structured bindings, and so those are the top two, and then we have like the top 5 group then would be nested namespace definitions, new attributes, and initializers and if and switch. And if you look now into the Boost usage data, we see like a slight trend to using more standard features with an increase in usage, but also we can see that's like not a big difference. Nested namespace definitions is a lot more popular with daily Boost users. That's also like, if you look at the data and if you think about Boost, that's not a big surprise. That's definitely something you benefit from if you use Boost. Same questions about C++11 library features. Again, we have a few Boost libraries in here, and always when I look at this graph, I'm surprised that shared pointer is in second place. Unique pointer first place, I can understand. And then after this is more or less the threading features with lock guard and thread, and then tuple and function. And if you combine it with Boost usage, I think this is one of the graphs which shows that really standard features are used a bit more with the daily Boost users. You guys can see a difference in the experience. This even comes more with the language features. Language features, not very surprising that auto constant expression, default delete on member functions, lambdas, null pointer, overload final, etc. are very popular. And the not so much used features are often very, features which are not often needed in your code. So not everybody has to touch them. But here we can also again see like a slight trend to a more uniform graph for the daily users, which seem to use the popular features more frequently. And now let's go quickly over the tooling questions. Of course, the compiler question is always interesting. GCC most popular, Clang and Visual Studio comes then. And if we look at that graph, we see like kind of interesting that the Visual Studio compiler is more popular than Clang with the Never folks, which also might be because it's like easily installable and beginner friendly. And maybe Clang is a bit more advanced, or it's difficult to look at that actually and like see like the reason for it, but it's there. So that's kind of showing us a bit of a difference here. And then we can see that the daily users and the sometime users don't really have a big difference here to the actually to the question. The question about sanitizers shows that a lot more folks need to pick up on sanitizers. And if we look into the usage data for Boost and filter it through this, we see that there is a bit more of an adoption in the more frequent users of Boost, but still not enough. Though we still, like, as a community, have to work a lot on having people add sanitizers to their builds. And again, I think that the Never group contains a lot of people starting and people not as experienced with C++. Makes sense that they not have so much usage, but still, that's something I hope we see an improvement in. And something else that is not as popular right now is the package manager. Here we see that most folks do not use package managers right now, unfortunately. And if you look through the Boost lens, we see that build2, which is also a tool which is a bit of related to Boost and known in the Boost community, it gets actually used by daily Boost users a tick more than by everyone else. And otherwise, Conan.io is popular with Boost, and with the Never folks, it's kind of on the same with VC package. But still, majority of users does not use any package manager. Another question I have in my survey is on open source licenses. And Boost has its own license, and here we see it's a second popular, only beaten by the MIT license, which a lot of libraries use, so that's okay. And if we look at the user data, then we see that the Boost software license is even the most popular license with daily Boost users. Okay, so the daily Boost users prefer that license. And they sometimes users, of course, they use Boost, it's popular and they have it. And in the Never folks, of course, there's still some usage, but it's like really visible that it drops off. And of course, I had to bring that question. Have you ever attended CppNow? I ask this like for every conference, just for funsies, but also kind of to show the community that, you know, yes, it's nice that you go to a conference, but you're like the 1%, the tiny minority which is out there. This graph looks a bit different for Meetingcpp and a bit different for CppCon and the other big conferences. CppNow is a fairly small conference, so of course not many folks come, but a lot from the Boost community hang out. So let's look if this is a bit different. And yeah, we can see like a trend to folks using Boost being more often at CppNow, but still we definitely can see like there's a big increase in people actually would like to come. So the not yet is kind of my option to express that you would like to come to the conference. But then there's still like a lot of folks which think it's out of their options to actually make this ever happen, which is sad. Maybe that changes with this year, but we'll see. Some non-C++ related questions I ask. So we can look now into some things which are not directly related to C++, like other programming languages. This is like a graph from the ISOCPP survey, and it's a bit different than what the results I have. But again, Python and C, if we look at my graph, the two big pillars are also C and Python. And I'm not sure if all the languages are the same, or I have more languages, or ISO has more languages. I'm not sure actually. But yeah. And if we look like into the Boost usage for this data, not a big difference. Just that the daily Boost users seem to have a bit more experience with Haskell, but I also kind of asking this question, like if it's in production or not, and then we probably would have a different question, a different result if it's not. One of the biggest biases I have in the survey is that most of the data right now seems to be from folks from Europe. I'd like to change that. So if you're from North America or Asia or from the rest of the world, if you're not from Europe, please take the survey. That would be great. Also, if you're from Europe, I don't mind if you take the survey, but that's like right now the biggest bias. Also kind of surprised me that it's so heavily expressed in the survey. But maybe also kind of an effect of the pandemic, and that my reach, the reach which I have myself is mostly in Europe, kind of reflects on that. And I do have a question on age distribution. So we see that, like, from 25 to almost 50 is kind of the age distribution in our community. Also not very big surprising. And if we look into the boost data, yeah, my suspicion that folks with the never crowd are a bit younger or not as experienced sometimes with C++ seems to be true here. And then we see that the average age probably gets a bit higher with the sometimes and the daily users. But still, the biggest, the median bar still is the yellow one, the 30s. It's like the most users, like between 30 and 50. Which is kind of the ground truth of the first graph too. I ask how many companies have you worked for, so employers, and again, with the daily boost users, we can see that they have a bit more employers than C++, and then the never folks, and the sometimes folks. But overall, the survey has a big bias towards like just one employer for C++, which I think speaks a lot about our community, that most people like had like 1 or 2 or 3 employers. Let me quickly talk about additions and new questions. So last year I can add questions, and that's all the way I did. I recently added the C++20 library and language feature questions, but I'm probably going to turn them off because right now the result is like 70 to 80% saying that they're not using C++20. And if I keep that running, then we will have that big bar in there which says not using C++20 forever. And so I kind of have to switch that on a bit later when we see that people are actually picking up C++20 when compilers are available in your build systems, etc. for that. Then prior to that, the newest questions were about IMGUI usage, testing, and standard attributes. And yeah, I have a question about Qt versions, not features. Qt has too many features to ask that. Also, Boost has too many libraries to ask that. And package managers add its back, and everything after other is often an added question, and not question, but answer option. I can do it in the tool; it's just easily doable. I can, but I have to put it at the end for various reasons. Some of the data from the tool comes from social media, where I post or try to post every day a question with the hashtag poll of today. And some user statistics. This is just statistics from the last, the overall votes and the users from the last 2 days. And with that, I just want to thank you for taking the survey if you have already. And if you have not, please contribute to the survey, which brings me to bonus slides. I want to quickly explain the combine questions feature. So the combine question feature lets you select 2 questions, and it's partly very useful, as you saw with this talk. But it's also a Cartesian product of questions, so the most combinations do not make any sense. And here I show you the question with how many other C++ developers do you interact at your job, combined with would you recommend your current workplace. And on the right side, you see the result of the first question, who has also answered the second question, and in this on the left, you can see the second question filtered by the options of the first, and that's basically the data which you saw also in this talk. But then using do you use Boost as the first question to filter the results? And here I filtered the question: how long have you been working with C++? Also, again, with in how many companies, employers did you work? And this kind of also is kind of validating the data. So people using C++ less than a year either have no employer because they're a student, or they have the first employer. And then we see that the longer you are in C++, the more popular it becomes to have more employers. And the age group question is filtered by and how many companies, employers have you been? And there we see also with age, the number of employers increases. Makes all sense, but it's like, for me, like an important validation of this feature. I have some functionality to filter on time, but it's a bit buggy, and I still have to kind of fix some things to make it like a multi-year filtering. And so, yeah, it's not linked if you like want to find it. It's not a range PHP, but I expect it to right now not really work and give reliable results. I still have to look at that again. And quickly brings me to bugs. And last year I had, unfortunately, a bug for a long time because I had one SQL query bringing the next question, and that scared really bad. And then later, I expected like to have like a and the performance was just slowed down, and the load time of the next question was several seconds. And I changed it to basically querying the questions you answered and all the questions IDs of the general questions, and then the tool just does a difference and randomizes somewhere either in the SQL or in the array, and gives you the next ID of the question. And that's then through that fix, I saw like a lot more people answering more questions again. And yeah, planned features. I have a source ability, so sometimes I give to some folks a link to the session, to the survey tool session with a tag, and then the session is tagged. One of those links is from Compiler Explorer, and we do actually have now enough data from Compiler Explorer that it would be worth looking into the data, and I still have to kind of write the script which extracts the data from the overall data and shows it as a graph. And I did not have time for that yet. And more questions about C++ 2023, and always happy to have other questions in the tool. If you have an idea, contact me. And that brings me to questions. See, we have like 7 minutes left for questions, and I quickly will see if I can get to the questions without ending the presentation. Or maybe I should just end the presentation. Yeah, okay. I see there's one question. 1 second. Okay, there's a question from Niall Douglas. Are you saying here that there is a correlation between Boost usage and C++ 17 usage rather than with C++ 98 usage? I would be careful to make that as a reliable thing to say. I think what you can see in the overall data is that we do not have a lot of people actually answering that they use 98 or 03. And that leads to a poor correlation with the boost question, which also not everyone answers. So in that point, I would ask you to use the combined tool and look at that and make your own conclusions, but be careful with the conclusions. I would not say that. I think that the other bias in the tool is that we see the data from people which are interested enough to run the survey and answer enough questions that they actually show up in the combined questions. Because you have to answer both questions for that, and not just one question, which randomly is selected then. So I think that a lot of the effects we saw between never and daily boost usage is the experience. So folks starting with C++ might not, be familiar. That's also one of the reasons probably why C++11 is so popular. But yeah, I wouldn't say that. I would be careful with that. And there's a question: do you plan to include some statistical analysis in the question comparison views? It's hard to draw accurate conclusions from the graph. That's an interesting feature request. I actually could look at that. So let's talk about that after the talk. If you have ideas on that, that is something I probably would be interested in maybe implementing in the future. Yes. Okay. And that brings me to the end of my talk. Thank you for listening. And I will now launch the browser and be available in the Discord, and probably also join the 2D world, Gather Town. And you can find me there if you have any questions, want to debate anything, you have feedback, questions, etc. Thank you.